Mandelbaum, Mandelbaum, Mandelbaum. I think The English Patient is one of those episodes that, it's a great episode. It's one of the ones I feel like they should have gone with a different title. Like, I know I've said countless of times, like Jerry said back in the, the How It Began documentary, how, he never wanted writers to focus on clever show titles, which is why they're always so simple, like The Heart Attack, The Contest. The English Patient was part of one of the plots, but it's the name of an actual movie. I would have called this maybe like The Number One Dad, The Cubans, maybe even The Neil, The Bad Movie. I don't know. I would have called it something else besides The English Patient. But besides that, of course, this was still another very excellent episode in Season 8. Continues the trends where I feel like we've seen a lot of Jerry's parents lately. A lot of back and forth with them coming up to Florida, them coming up to New York, him going down to Florida. So much back and forth. And actually, this is the first episode in the entire series where they went down to Florida and there was no scenes involving Jack Klompus. Interesting, huh? So, anyways, what was the stories behind The English Patient? Well, first off, again, Jerry was going down to Florida, helping his parents move into their new condo. Kramer asked for a favor while he was down there, if he can pick up some Cubans, because he's trying to make a deal with someone, with a cigar person, who ended up being that Earl guy from back in the Diplomats Club that he had he tried to hustle at the airport. They were betting on flights not arriving on time and such. So he asked Jerry if he can do that for him. He's like, fine, I'll do it. Jerry, though, thinks he's literally getting actual Cuban cigars. George, meanwhile, was at the coffee shop alone. He ordered a surprise. You know what the order menu just says, surprise me. This beautiful young lady named Danielle walks over and is like, Neil, grabs George's arm, and George's like, what the? But then this woman said, I'm sorry, you look a lot like my boyfriend Neil. I was supposed to meet him here. And of course, George was just like so stunned, like, holy smokes, like this beautiful woman has this guy who looks like me. My type is good enough for her. Of course, it's not, she was no Marissa Tomei or anything, but of course, it just stunned George that he was just like overjoyed, like, this guy Neil is like me. But it's like he's obsessed. He's like, I gotta find out how a guy like Neil can get a woman like Danielle. So then he starts plotting his way how to figure that out. And then Elaine had this boyfriend named, I think his name was Blaine, I believe it was. Blaine and Elaine were going to go see a movie. Elaine wanted to see Sack Lunch. But Blaine wanted to see The English Patient, which was actually an award-winning film. So she decided, sure, we'll go ahead, we'll go see the movie. Of course, everyone coming out of the theater was in love with it. Even a bunch of Elaine's friends were coming out, like Carol and the other people who, the baby lady and like a bunch of Elaine's other friends, were coming out crying in tears. Blaine enjoyed it. Elaine, though, absolutely hated it. She thought it sucked. But the more people she kept telling that she didn't like The English Patient, everyone kept turning on her. She felt like she was the only person in the entire city of New York that did not like The English Patient. It actually ended up with her friends went to the movies with Blaine again to see The English Patient, while Elaine went to see Sack Lunch. They were all shunning her. Even when she was at the coffee shop, she got shunned as well by her waitress because she didn't like The English Patient. Which is a very fitting Elaine story. Like, Elaine, I'm not saying Elaine's a nasty woman. But Elaine seems like that's someone who has the opinion completely opposite of everyone else. She stands out like a sore thumb. And then, we'll get to, what happened at the end of the episode and who she ended up going to see it with next. Because she couldn't fib. But anyways, so then George goes down to Florida. And before he left, there was this store that was closed now. I was selling all these number one dad shirts. Jerry gave one to his dad. And then I guess they were walking around the area and he sees there's this guy named Izzy Mandelbaum, who was like an old man of like 84 years old, but he wanted to be consider himself number one. He wanted to consider himself the most fit man on the planet. And then what happened was Izzy challenged Jerry to a weightlifting contest or something, and Izzy pulled out his back when he went too far. So they called an ambulance, and then I think he ended up going back to New York to get treatment on his back. But then of course he goes to visit him because Jerry's parents made him feel bad, well, especially his mom. And then while he's there, he also meets Izzy's son and Izzy's father, who all seem like they're like all the same age. Which, because if Izzy's 84, no, Izzy was 80. Lloyd Bridges, who played Izzy, was like 84 at the time. But yet we meet his dad, who knows, maybe like 100 years old, 99 years old, who knows? Because Izzy claimed he got married in high school. Because the son didn't seem like he was that much younger either. But the both of them think, oh, you think you're better than me? I can lift this TV up. And then they try to lift the TVs. They both threw their backs out. So they were in the beds. Which, of course, they're actually the owners of the Magic Pond Crepe or something like that. Some crepe restaurant they owned. So they needed people to work it. Well, meanwhile, I got a little far ahead here. In the middle of the one night at Jerry's place, Kramer, so Jerry promised Kramer he'd bring back those Cubans, which he thought was cigars. Well, these guys show up. The guys ended up being the Cubans that were supposed to come. Jerry thought he was referring to actual Cuban cigars, so he had to let them sleep at his parents' house that night. Brings them up to New York. They end up being Dominicans, so they say. And then of course, the deal didn't go through because they weren't real Cubans; they were Dominicans. And then Kramer had like nothing he could do. He had for them. He was trying to avoid them. But then, whenever the Mandelbaums, went down with their back injuries, Jerry thought, maybe he can get the Dominicans to roll the crepes for them. So he was having them do that. Get back to that in a second. Getting back to George now. He was, again, just like he wanted to meet this Neil guy. So he showed up again at Monk's, and Danielle happened to be there. And George, and I don't know why on earth George would have the balls to do this. He then asked if he could have Neil's phone number. And if that was me, if I was ever asked by someone, can I have your significant other's phone number? I'd be freaked out like, no thanks, not happening. She took it in. Not only did she take it in, she took him out to dinner. And they pretty much went on a date. George walked her home, and then she offered to have him come in, but then George was like, oh, no, he goes, I can't do that. I'll have to get home in case Neil calls. And Danielle went to kiss him goodbye, but he walked away as she was going to kiss him. And then, of course, Jerry thought that was stupid of him to do because he was more concerned about a guy calling her. And he's like, George was obsessed. He's like, I gotta figure out how a guy like Neil, who looks like me, could get a beautiful woman like Danielle. And then Jerry said, you don't have to. You went out on a date with her last night. She invited you in. You're in. He's out. You've out-Neiled her. Which is the other reason why I say they should call this episode The Neil. Or something like that. I don't know. So that's when George realizes that, yes, he's got the upper hand now. There's a new Neil in town. So then he walks away. And he goes to see Danielle. And I believe he asked her to move in with him. And she said yes. But she had to break it off with Neil. So we then get to the scene where everyone was at the the Mandelbaum's crepe restaurant, and Danielle was there with Neil, saying how it's over and she wants to be with George. But then a lot of people, including Neil, which we never saw his face, we saw the back of his head, but including Neil, got squirted in the eye with the crepe. Having Kramer realized that the Dominicans were rolling the crepes too tight. Because Izzy was very particular, saying how that, it takes a real Mandelbaum to roll the proper crepe. Like, not the proper way and whatnot. And the Dominicans, again, were just rolling them too tight, and everybody was getting squirted in the face. And unfortunately, Neil was one of them. George, of course, goes to the hospital because Danielle was there with Neil. And then, of course, basically he looks over and sees him, but he's all bandaged up. Which apparently for real happened in The English Patient. Which I'll get back to that story in a second. But then George is trying to give Danielle the key to his apartment. But then Danielle is like, no, I can't move in with you. I have to take Neil to a clinic in, I think it was England. And George's like freaking out. He's like, no. He's like, marry me. I'll burn myself. I'll burn my parents. And he was saying like all this like crazy shenanigans. And basically just, George, I'm sorry, I can't. So she wants sympathy now for Neil. Because Neil got burned in the eye. So George got out-Neiled by Neil. But as George is walking out, Neil just says, hey, George, I win. And as George walks out, he pulled the IV out of the fluid bag and shuts the door. Apparently that was improvised by Jason Alexander. Nice little touch there for George basically doing a last little F-U to Neil for, George thought he out-Neiled Neil, then Neil out-Neiled George. But then, of course, the English Patient story. Again, Elaine was basically shunned by everybody because she didn't like the English Patient. Well, then she was in a meeting with, of all people, Peterman. And Peterman raved about the movie while Elaine was in there. Elaine, too flustered to admit she hated it because she was trying to avoid any type of, of Peterman's nonsense she could, decided to say, I haven't seen it. Peterman's solution? Drop all you're doing, we're going to go see it. So Elaine got stuck going to see The English Patient yet again. And not even halfway through the film, she starts flipping out. Peterman was going to fire her, but instead he was so angry at her that instead of firing her, he sent her to live in a cave for 6 weeks in Tunisia, or wherever the heck it was called. So in the final scene, Elaine was on the plane there, and they were teasing to do a production, but it was going to be some type of a comedy thing where she's like, okay, awesome. She was worried they were going to actually play The English Patient. But then the Dominicans that Kramer had gathered ended up being real Cubans. They were just posed as Dominicans. They hijacked the plane with their number one dad shirts. Now, of course, a lot of people say it was unknown how they got them. Only thing I can think of was Kramer bought a bunch of them, so maybe he just gave them to them when he was chilling with them or whatnot. But basically they were hijacked, and Elaine's like, oh, nuts. I forget it. So, I don't know if Elaine really went there for 6 weeks or whatnot, but who knows. All I know is that she does not like The English Patient. And yeah, Jerry trying to save the Mandelbaum's restaurant with the crepes didn't go too well either. George got out-Neiled. And Kramer, of course, didn't get his deal on the Cuban cigars. So nobody won this round. But it was still a good movie. But maybe a good episode. Maybe a different name, though. But that's the English Patient episode. And that's actually it for Disc 3 of Season 8. We've flown through Season 8 pretty quickly, I feel like. Jeff Kurt Miller, who plays Neil in this episode, was an extra in a couple other episodes. And he also, for 6 seasons, for seasons 6 through 9, acted as George's stand-in. There's also the dinner waitress at the beginning of the episode that George asked to surprise him with, a meal. Lori Bowles, in real life, is actually Julia Louis-Dreyfus's half-sister. Again, we do, and of course, talk about the weird, thing with how old Izzy, his dad, and his son was, they were all like, seemed to all be the same age. But Earl Schumann, who played Izzy Sr., was born February 24th, 1916. Lloyd Bridges, who played Izzy, the son, is actually 3 years older than Earl Schumann in real life. He was born January 15th, 1913. And of course, again, we have Earl, who is the investor for a cigar rolling business, was the same character who appeared in the Diplomats Club, and I guess Earl must have forgiven Kramer for hustling him in that episode. Let me see here. Like I said, this was the first episode with scenes in Florida that didn't include Jack Klompus. Let me see here. All that. The English Patient, of course, is actually a real film. It won 9 Academy Awards for Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Actress in a Supporting Role, Juliette Binoche, Best Sound, Best Film Editing, Best Original Dramatic Score, Best Cinematography, Best Director, and Best Picture as well. And also, of course, George pulling the IV out of the fluid bag was improvised by Jason Alexander. And also the whole idea of Neil actually having his face bandaged up from being critically burned by the crepe was exactly just how the English Patients was. So, reference there as well. That does it, guys. We got through another disc of Seinfeld. Again, we have one more disc. There's only 5 episodes left in Season 8. And then we'll be on to Season 9. Almost done, guys. Let's keep on cooking. So there's a couple good ones, I believe, on the last disc of Season 8. Including, I hereby declare this the Summer of George. We'll find out what that is later on. So guys, what are your thoughts on the English Patient episode? Do you think they should have renamed it something different? Make sure to leave your thoughts down in the comments section below. And be sure as always to slap a like on the video, subscribe more content on my channel, and follow me on Twitter as well, at DemandAirborne93. And always remember, guys, Mandelbaum, Mandelbaum, Mandelbaum. I'll catch you guys later. Have a great rest of your night. Peace out, everybody.